He raised his hand. That's how it started. One classroom, one boy, one dream. "I want to go to Harvard," he said. Just like that. No arrogance, no show, just a statement of hope, standing in a room full of people who looked at him like he'd said something absurd. There was a moment of silence, and then came the laughter. Not just from the back row, not just from the kids who always had something to say, but from the very person who was supposed to be guiding him. It wasn't just the laughter. It was the way they looked at him, like he didn't know his place. Like a boy from that neighborhood, wearing worn-out shoes, had no business speaking that name. No one offered advice. No one said, "Let's work on it." They just moved on, as if his ambition was a joke. He stopped talking about it after that day, but he never let it go. Not really. In the hallways, they started calling him Harvard, not as praise, but as a punchline. Sticky notes on his locker, snide comments in the cafeteria, even a fake acceptance letter someone slid into his backpack. They didn't see effort. They didn't see potential. They saw a black boy with a dream that didn't match the script they had for him, and that made them uncomfortable. But dreams don't die just because they're ignored. They burn quietly until they don't, because something happened that none of them were ready for. And when it did, the same people who mocked him fell silent. Not out of guilt, not out of kindness, but because the punchline had just become the headline. And what happened next? You'll want to stay for this. If you're new to this channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from viewers around the world. Marcus had always been quiet, not because he was shy, not because he lacked opinions, but because experience had taught him that speaking up came with consequences. In class, his hand would go up and stay there. Teachers would call on others, or worse, roll their eyes like he was being a teacher's pet. When he did speak, someone would snicker. Whispers would spread, and that name, Harvard, would echo around the room, not as inspiration, but mockery. He learned to keep his answers to himself, not because he didn't know them, but because the cost of being right was too high when you looked like Marcus. He lived on the east side of Detroit, the kind of neighborhood they don't put on postcards. Abandoned lots, corners where deals went down, gunshots that came without warning. Ambition in that environment didn't just make you different, it made you a target. But Marcus didn't try to be like everyone else. He didn't hustle in the streets, didn't fall into line, didn't sag his pants or try to talk tough just to fit in. He carried a backpack worn at the straps, bursting with books from the school library. He read everything he could get his hands on, biographies, history, physics. While other kids ran the block, Marcus ran through chapters. He was hungry, not for food, though some nights that was true too, but for something more. Knowledge, freedom, proof that his life could be more than survival. His mother, Denise, was the kind of woman who never asked for sympathy. She worked mornings at a diner, nights at a nursing home, and still came home with sore feet and a laugh for Marcus. She didn't have time for self-pity, but she had time for her son. She believed in him before anyone else did, told him he was meant for more, told him the world would try to erase him, but that he couldn't let them. She used to say, "They'll judge you before you say a word. You gotta let your work speak louder." Marcus listened. He spent weekends at the public library, sometimes walking 2 miles because the bus pass money had to go toward groceries that week. He would sit there for hours, taking notes, highlighting pages, copying vocabulary words into a spiral notebook with a cracked cover. Other kids had Jordans. Marcus had a dictionary with the cover falling off. He studied for the SATs on a second-hand laptop that took 10 minutes just to turn on, typed essays at the kitchen table while roaches skittered across the floor because the landlord hadn't fixed the cracks in the walls. He didn't complain. He didn't post about the struggle. He just kept going. But at school, none of that mattered. They saw his skin before they saw his scores, saw his zip code before they saw his GPA. Even when he aced tests, teachers would raise an eyebrow. One asked him, point blank, if he copied answers from someone else. Another told him Harvard's not realistic for kids like you. He was in honors classes, but he wasn't honored. The guidance counselor, who was supposed to help with college planning, told him to consider community college first, not because of his grades, but because of financial limitations. Marcus never asked for pity, he asked for a shot. But they made it clear, his dream was too big for his skin. Still, he kept showing up, kept reading, kept writing, even when they whispered, even when he sat alone at lunch, even when someone keyed "stay in your lane" onto his locker door. He cleaned it off, didn't say a word, just took out his notebook and kept writing his Harvard essay. Because somewhere deep down, Marcus believed something the rest of them didn't, that his story wasn't meant to be small, that he could turn pain into power, that every insult, every rejection, every side-eye in the hallway was fuel. He didn't know how, he didn't know when, but he knew one thing for sure, he wasn't going to let them be right. And while they laughed in his face, he was preparing for something they'd never see coming. By the time Marcus stepped into 10th grade, he wasn't shy about it anymore. He had one goal, and he was done keeping it quiet. He scrawled it in black Sharpie inside his locker door where he could see it every morning. Class of 2025, Crimson. Not maybe. Not if things work out. Just a declaration. Harvard. That one word sparked chaos. It started with the usual whispers. Then came the comments in the hallway. Yo, Marcus thinks he's Obama now. Man, sit down. You ain't getting into no Harvard. I didn't know Ivy Leagues were taking food stamp kids these days. Some of it was meant to be jokes, but the laughter was never light. They laughed like he had crossed a line, like someone from where he came from wasn't allowed to want more than a city college or a job at the corner store. Even teachers weren't subtle. His history teacher, Mr. Landers, let out a low chuckle during class when Marcus mentioned Harvard during a college prep discussion. I admire the ambition, he said with a smirk, but maybe let's think about something that's actually possible, like trade school. Marcus didn't flinch. He'd been hearing that tone since 4th grade. The tone that sounds like concern but drips with bias. The tone that pretends to care but dares you not to dream. Then came the meeting with the guidance counselor. She smiled. She used polite words, but the message was clear. Harvard is extremely competitive, Marcus. Maybe look at a few backup schools, or start with a 2-year program and transfer. You don't want to set yourself up for disappointment. He sat there nodding, gripping the arm of the chair so tight it left marks on his skin. She hadn't even looked at his updated transcript. 3.9 GPA, top 10% of his class, over 150 hours of volunteer work, leadership roles, and a personal statement already in the works, draft number 6. But none of that seemed to matter when your skin wasn't the Harvard kind of skin. They all talked like his dream was a threat to their version of the world. But Marcus didn't stop. He studied at lunch while others scrolled through TikTok. Stayed after school in the library long after the lights started flickering. He took the SAT not once, not twice, but 3 times, and each time his score went up. 1210, then 1340, then 1430. Still not perfect, but it wasn't about perfection. It was about proof. Proof that he belonged. He began volunteering weekends at the food bank, loading boxes, stacking cans, helping seniors fill out paperwork. Not for college applications, but because he remembered what it felt like to have no food in the fridge and only pride on the table. He started a tutoring group for 7th and 8th graders in his old middle school. He wanted them to see what he never got to see, someone who looked like them refusing to shrink. And when he could have been playing games or relaxing, Marcus was writing emails to professors, alumni, admissions officers, anyone who might give him 5 minutes of their time. Most didn't reply, but one did. A political science professor at Harvard named Dr. Levy wrote back late one night. He said, "Your story is powerful. Your determination reminds me of why I became a teacher. Keep going." Marcus printed that email, kept it folded in his back pocket like a secret weapon. Still, the pushback didn't stop. At school, he was still Harvard to the bullies, but now they said it with venom. Someone made a meme of his face with the caption, "From the projects to the Ivy League? Keep dreaming, my guy." It got passed around group chats, showed up on Instagram stories. Even teachers saw it and said nothing. But Marcus stayed silent. Let it build. Let them laugh. Because he knew something they didn't. Every insult was fuel. Then, one Monday morning, he walked to his locker, like he always did, ready to grab his chemistry book and his notebook. But the door was already open. That was the first red flag. Inside, his textbooks were torn in half, pages ripped out, spines broken. His vision board, the one he had worked on for weeks, was destroyed, cut into shreds, soaked in soda, bleeding color and hope onto the floor. Taped to the inside wall was a sticky note, neon yellow. 4 words, scrawled in black ink, "Dream smaller, Harvard." Marcus stood there for 5 full minutes, still, silent, not moving. People passed by. Some glanced, then kept walking. Some looked directly at the mess and laughed. One boy took out his phone, snapped a picture, walked away shaking his head. Marcus didn't say a word. He just crouched down, picked up each torn page, wiped the sticky soda from the laminated quotes he had printed from Maya Angelou, James Baldwin, Nelson Mandela. He didn't cry. He didn't run. He threw away the sticky note. And the next day, he showed up again with a new board, bigger, brighter, laminated, bold red letters across the top, "Dream even bigger." And that was the day the laughter started to sound a little nervous. Senior year came. The pressure felt different now, not louder, just heavier, like it settled in his bones. Marcus knew what was at stake. Every test, every assignment, every college form, he treated them like lifelines. There was no plan B. Not because he was arrogant, but because when people spend their whole lives expecting you to settle, settling feels like defeat. He submitted his Harvard application on the final night before the deadline. He sat at his kitchen table, rereading every sentence of his essay 5 times over. It didn't start with statistics, or leadership awards, or buzzwords. It started with truth. When I was 9, I asked my mom what Harvard looked like. She pulled up a picture. I printed it out. That picture has been taped above my bed ever since. It wasn't about impressing anyone. It was about telling them who he was. A kid from Detroit, from a 1-bedroom apartment that sometimes went without heat. From a family where college wasn't dinner conversation, it was fantasy. He wrote about watching his mom fall asleep on the couch in her nurse's scrubs, too tired to eat dinner. About the time their electricity got cut off, and he studied for midterms by flashlight. About the night he almost gave up until he heard his little brother telling a neighbor that Marcus was gonna be the first one in Harvard. He hit submit at 11:42 p.m. And then silence. Weeks passed. No one at school asked how it went. No one brought up Harvard again. They assumed he got the rejection letter and was too embarrassed to talk about it. Some didn't even remember he applied. He heard the whispers again, but this time they didn't sting, because something in him had shifted. He'd done it. He dared to want more, and followed through. Even if Harvard said no, he wasn't going to carry that as failure. He'd built himself from concrete and glass, not paper and praise. Still, he checked his email every morning and every night, just in case. Then came March 31st, college decision day. The day inboxes across the country either broke hearts or made futures. Marcus had biology first period. He didn't open his phone. Second period, AP Lit, still nothing. It was 6:03 p.m. Marcus had waited all day, pretending not to care, pretending to be calm. But now he was alone. No classmates, no teachers, no noise. Just him, the couch, and a screen. His hands trembled as he logged in, slowly. The Harvard portal spun and spun, buffering. He thought about everything. The torn books, the sticky note that said, "Dream smaller," his teacher's smirk, his counselor's polite dismissal. Every eye roll when he raised his hand. Every time someone said, "You talk white." Every moment that tried to convince him this goal wasn't made for people like him. The page finally loaded. "Congratulations, Marcus. Welcome to Harvard." He didn't react at first. He just stared, like his brain couldn't catch up to what his eyes were seeing. Then, quietly, he blinked and let out a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a sob. It built from his chest, out of his throat, until it filled the room. He screamed, loud, unapologetic, free. His mom had just walked through the door, keys in hand, her back aching from another 12-hour shift. She dropped everything. "Marcus, what happened? What's wrong?" He turned the laptop toward her. Didn't say a word. She looked and froze. Then she covered her mouth. Tears came fast, no warning. She didn't try to hold them back. She dropped to her knees right there on the porch. Her baby was going to Harvard. Not because someone gave him a pass, but because he earned it through noise and silence and scars. "Told you not to let them put you in a box," and she cried. Not because he got into Harvard, but because he hadn't let the world steal his dream. Neighbors heard the yelling and came out. Someone asked what was going on. His mom could barely get the words out. "He did it. My son got in." Within minutes, word spread. Phones buzzed, people peeked out of windows. Even the man across the street, who never said much beyond a nod, walked over and gave Marcus a fist bump. "You showed them," he said. "All of them." Later that night, Marcus sat on the edge of his bed. The Harvard photo was still taped above it. Faded, the corners curling. He didn't take it down. He didn't need to. That picture no longer represented a dream. It was now a destination. And yet, he knew the work wasn't over, because getting in was just the beginning. He was still the same black kid from the east side of Detroit, walking into classrooms where he might be the only one who looked like him, still carrying the weight of proving he belonged. But for now, for this moment, he let himself breathe. He let himself feel it. Because in a world that had tried, again and again, to tell him who he wasn't, Marcus had just reminded them exactly who he was. And now, they'd have to put some respect on that name. The next day, Marcus walked into school wearing the Harvard hoodie. The real one. Not some cheap knockoff from a corner shop, not some hand-me-down from a friend who thought it was funny. This was the actual deal. Dark crimson with that iconic logo proudly stitched across his chest. He walked down the hallway with his head high, but not out of arrogance. No, this was something different. This was the calm of someone who had fought too long, too hard to need to prove anything to anyone anymore. The usual chatter? Gone. The snickers? Vanished. The whispers behind his back? Silenced. The hallways felt still, almost unnatural. Marcus knew what was happening. They were all thinking the same thing. The ones who had laughed at his dreams. The ones who had rolled their eyes when he mentioned his goals. The ones who had, with a simple phrase, tried to box him into their expectations of who he should be. Suddenly, they weren't talking. They were looking down, avoiding eye contact. For the first time, Marcus didn't feel like the outsider. He wasn't the joke. He wasn't the punchline. He was the proof. The living, breathing example of what could happen when you refused to be dismissed. When he passed by his history teacher, the one who once told him to aim for something realistic, the man didn't make eye contact. He didn't say anything, just turned quickly and scurried away. The guidance counselor who'd suggested a less competitive school, she found him in the hallway and, with a forced smile, gave him a congratulatory hug. "Marcus, I'm so proud of you," she said, a little too loudly, but Marcus didn't feel the warmth he should have. Not from her. She had told him to dream smaller. Her pride felt hollow now, as if it had more to do with clearing her own conscience than genuinely celebrating him. But Marcus? He just smiled. The kind of smile that came from knowing you'd already achieved everything they thought you couldn't. You'd proven them wrong. And now? Well, now it didn't matter what they thought anymore. He didn't need the applause. He didn't need their approval, because he had already won. Marcus didn't just go to Harvard, he thrived. He wasn't there to be another student, quietly taking up space. He was there to conquer, to show not just the world but himself what was possible. Neuroscience was his passion, and he poured everything into it, just as he had done back in Detroit. He wasn't just learning from textbooks. He was discovering, researching, pushing the boundaries of what he could achieve. His professors quickly realized that Marcus wasn't there to play it safe. He was there to lead. Graduating with honors was just the beginning. Marcus became involved in student advocacy groups, specifically those advocating for Black students' rights and representation. He understood what it was like to feel invisible, to be underestimated, and he used his voice to ensure no one else had to go through the same struggles he faced. He organized protests, delivered speeches, and led movements on campus. His leadership didn't just make a mark, it changed the culture at Harvard. But what he considered most important wasn't just the accolades or the degree. It was the ability to give back, to inspire others who felt like he once did, like they didn't belong. So, 4 years later, Marcus found himself walking back into that same high school where it all began. The building hadn't changed much. The cracked tiles still lined the floor. The same lockers, the same hallways, the same feeling of being surrounded by expectations. But this time, the atmosphere was different. Students were gathered in the hallway, phones out, eyes wide. They weren't mocking him now, they were listening. He stepped into the center of the crowd and began to speak, his voice steady but full of passion. "You see, your dreams aren't too big," Marcus said, looking around at the sea of faces, many of whom had been his classmates back in the day. "Maybe your circle is too small." The room went silent, hanging on to his every word. "They laughed at me, they mocked me, they told me I'd never make it, but here's the truth. What they call delusional, I call vision." He paused, letting the words sink in, and continued. "Don't let anyone shrink your dreams because they can't see what's possible for you. When I said Harvard, they laughed. But I wasn't trying to fit into their world, I was creating my own." Marcus wasn't just talking about academic success. He was talking about breaking barriers. He was talking about defying the odds. He was telling them that it was okay to dream big, even if everyone around them tried to tell them it was impossible. As he finished his speech, the room didn't erupt into applause. It didn't need to. The change was already happening. The students who had once thought of their dreams as out of reach now stood taller. They weren't looking for validation from anyone. They were ready to carve out their own path, just as Marcus had done. For Marcus, this was more than just a guest speaker appearance. This was his moment of full circle. He had gone from the boy who had been told to dream smaller to the man showing an entire generation that the only limits that existed were the ones you allowed to define you. Marcus didn't chase Harvard to prove them wrong. He chased it to prove himself right. For so long, people had told him what he couldn't do, what he should settle for. They had built walls around him, told him to accept the limitations they saw, to stop dreaming so big. But Marcus wasn't just trying to escape those walls. He was tearing them down. He didn't need their approval. He didn't need to rub his success in anyone's face. His victory was never about getting back at the people who doubted him. It was about validating the one voice that had never wavered, his own. He had believed in himself when no one else would. He had fought when the world told him it was futile. And that was the real triumph. In a world that too often measures worth by zip codes, test scores, or skin color, Marcus refused to let those definitions box him in. He knew that success wasn't about fitting a mold. It was about breaking the mold. He didn't just want to be a Harvard graduate. He wanted to be the type of person who changed what that title meant, who showed everyone that greatness wasn't reserved for the few, but attainable by anyone with the right mindset. Marcus didn't have a plan B. He had a vision, one that no one could take from him. And now, with a Harvard degree in hand, he wasn't just one man standing on a stage. He was the symbol of what could happen when someone didn't listen to the limitations placed on them. He wasn't the exception. He was the blueprint. He was showing that all of us, no matter where we come from, have the power to redefine what success looks like. Because sometimes, The biggest revenge isn't anger. It's excellence. And excellence wasn't just Marcus's weapon. It was his legacy. It wasn't just about proving others wrong. It was about proving to himself that he was more than the world ever expected him to be. He walked into Harvard as the underdog and left as someone who had rewritten the rules. His story wasn't just about one man's rise. It was about the countless others who were now inspired to break their own boundaries. Marcus had created a ripple that would keep spreading, showing the next generation that they too had the power to dream big and succeed. And with that, the message was clear. No matter where you come from, no matter what others say, the only limits that exist are the ones you choose to accept.